Okay, so welcome everybody to Desertification Island Discs number 10. It's a monumental episode this time round. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Dickinson, who is the Executive Chair and founder of CDP. Hi Paul, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm brilliant, thanks mate. It's great to meet you as well. Thanks for taking time to come and talk to us today. So I guess you'd have to kind of live underneath a massive rock to not know if you work in sustainability and not know what CDP is. But for those of us that are just kind of maybe just getting into the sector, can you just tell us a little bit about CDP and what it does?
Sure, thank you. I mean, you know, we are known in the sector, but we're not known outside of it. So I don't generally expect people to know very well. We're not Coca-Cola. We're about 20 years old. We're a not-for-profit, a UK registered charity, and we have charitable entities around the world. And we're really most famous for representing investors. So we're actually in our 19th annual cycle of representing a big group of investors. And on behalf of those investors, going out to the biggest companies in the world and saying, report into our databases on your greenhouse gas emissions strategy on climate change, that kind of thing. Actually, at this point in this year, 2021, we represent about 650 investors with about $105 trillion, which is quite a bit more than the GDP of the world. So it's a lot of money. And because of that, a large number of companies report to us. We actually have about 9,600 big companies report to us. Actually, a lot of them are also reporting to their customers through us. So we represent about 200 companies with an annual purchasing spend of about $5 trillion. So all of that data comes into CDP databases, and then we sell it for much less than it costs us to acquire it, I'm afraid. People like Bloomberg and MSCI and others, and it makes their way into environmental products. There's lots more I could say, but that's the overview.
That's great. So a big kind of stat there is 20 years. So you founded this 20 years, you had the idea 20 years ago. And so I guess you didn't get a chance to have your big party last year with COVID. But
No, there was a gala. There was a gala event online. So I can tell you that they're not quite the same gala events online. I had this fantastic, costume, wasn't able to wear it.
Well, but congratulations, 20 years is, no mean feat. And I guess that's probably a good question. Has it become what you set out for it to become? Or how is it from that initial vision you had for CDP? And have you achieved that, or where are you in that kind of cycle?
Yeah, I mean, 20 years is such an incredibly long period of time that there are quite a few different factors that I would weave into my answer. I mean, the first one is that the world has moved so dramatically on climate change in 20 years that when we started, in our first ever information request, we didn't even, it was too controversial to say climate change was real. But what we could say is that the UK government had a carbon levy on industry, industrial electricity. So we could say actions in response to the perceptions of climate change were real.
Wow.
You fast forward to 2021, and what in some ways is feels like the greatest victory for us is that the G7 have mandated TCFD. And I mean, when Mark Carney came together in 2014, 2015, to form the TCFD, we already had a climate disclosure standards board. We applied that. We did everything we could do to support Carney's brilliant task force. Then when they reported, we redesigned CDP to include TCFD. So we've been on a long journey to drive government action. And in some ways, yeah, we feel a bit vindicated by that G7. But then we're expanding now to biodiversity, waste, water, oceans, topsoil. So it is, as Christiana Figueres' father, the former president of Costa Rica, said, "La lucha sin fin," it is the struggle without end.
Yeah, so it's a constant battle, and still going to be a constant battle, do you think, as well?
I think people like us are going to be working on climate change and sustainability issues probably at least until 2150.
Yeah, yeah. And so okay, so let's go back to that the 20 years then. So when's the big change come? This perception of this now. What has it been, Carney and those task forces around TCFD that have really helped drive us, or are there other factors that you think have come into play to really kind of push this to the top of many people's agendas now?
I mean, it's a great question to say what's really been the big things over 20 years. And I mean, of course, the truth is there are no silver bullets. You, me, and zillions of people like us have all been chipping away. And, we kind of broke the dam, but it wasn't any one of us that did it. I mean, things that leap out at me over the years. I think the Stern report was really important to kind of smash the ideology of the discount rate and say, actually, there's an economic case for taking action now. I think Hurricane Katrina was very important. When we saw, many people losing their lives in North America, and the potential power of extreme weather. As we move further ahead, I think the Obama administration were very helpful. I think the Paris Agreement was absolutely pivotal, and its impact can never be overestimated. And then, in contradistinction, Trump took the whole world back about 4 years. But then finally, I would say, beyond the great work of Mark Carney and his associates, you've got to hand it to Greta Thunberg, 4.5 million school children on strike, Extinction Rebellion, and now the legal cases, engine number one at Exxon, Friends of the Earth, Netherlands with Shell. I mean, I could go on for hours, but those feel to me like some of the real biggies. And I think Al Gore gets a word. It's a real pity he was a Democrat politician, and that didn't help. But I mean,
Yeah.
he did a fantastic job of raising awareness.
Is that true? Did we used to refer to, we didn't really notice, but we used to refer to this stuff as global warming, right? And then climate change became a new narrative in kind of George Bush era times. And I guess you can be very cynical about the way we look at that being a much softer term, but it is interesting, like all those factors that you just talked about. I think more than ever, from my perspective, we're seeing it. I think from the ethical consumer perspective, the people just wanting better or asking better questions maybe than we were before.
That was the biggest omission in my list. You're absolutely right. It is money from the public, because that recognition that we can't sort of wait for government, but actually we're voting every day with the way we invest, with the way we purchase. That's absolutely critical. You're completely right, and it manifests in ESG. It manifests. Um, I mean, I definitely talk about 5 sectors. Renewable energy, not a surprise to you. Electric vehicles, not a surprise to you. Energy efficiency, often overlooked. But the two people talk about less, but I think are going to be absolutely huge, is food, which we could talk about. It's just gigantic. Food science, by the way, is the opposite of cooking. So
Yeah.
we've been doing cooking for thousands of years, which is making the same things taste different. Food science is making different things taste the same. We've never done that before, but science has been unleashed with capital and innovation. But then the fifth one I just want to mention is dematerialization, I would call it, which is essentially what we're doing now. Transport substitution through high bandwidth and that's I mean, for example, like everybody, I now consume my Financial Times on my phone, and not on a pulped tree that was delivered by a diesel van.
Exactly. And soon you won't be using the money that we'd normally be using to pay for these things either, right? So all these systems are being ripped up, started again in many ways. So
yeah,
so I guess go back to kind of that ESG piece actually, which is really interesting because there's a huge noise, isn't there, behind ESG at the moment, and CDP, as you said, that was set up for that, right? To aid disclosure, to help people get out the material facts around global warming, climate change, carbon management, whatever it might be. How have you seen that evolution from investors, like coming to you? Are they hungrier for the information, more hungry now than they've ever been? What's their kind of view of carbon disclosure and reporting, you think, now?
Well, I'll give you just 2 anecdotes, because I mean, this is a sort of enormous subject. One point I want to make about ESG is it's in constant evolution. So let's imagine that you and I were working, as ESG analysts in a big asset manager 10 years ago. We would probably be running around talking to the auto analysts about how they should factor in electric vehicles. And they'd be saying to us, oh no, electric vehicles, forget it, it's never going to happen. They're just toys, right? Whereas I think if we had the same jobs now, in a big investment manager, we wouldn't be going to the auto analyst talking about electric vehicles because they're all over electric vehicles.
Yeah, yeah.
But to me, there's a notion of ESG representing a sort of vanguard comprehension of the what is coming. That it's a kind of it's a form of investment theme. So that's the first observation I would make. I think the second one is that what will animate information is policy. And I give one example over and over again. Good old American Electric Power, bless them. I mean, not a company I know very well, but one thing I do know about them is they produce about 130, 150 million tons of CO2. I know that because they've been reporting for 19 years to CDP, producing 130 to 150 million tons. The problem is that 130 million multiplied by $0 equals $0.
Yeah.
People often say to me, are people using CDP data or not? Or do you need to get different data? And it's like, oh, well, then you haven't got the right data. And I'm like, shut up. We've got exactly the right data. We just haven't got any policy.
Yeah. So what's the policy that helps all this?
Price on carbon, regulation, regulate the problem away. I remember once I wanted to try and kind of prove a point to myself. So I thought I'll go on Google. And it took me about 3 minutes to find two graphs of cigarette prices and cigarette consumption. One was from France, showed the cigarette prices going up like that, and the cigarette consumption going down, 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 down. One was from the United States, showing the price of cigarettes going up, 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 and then the volume of cigarettes going down, down, down. It's not very complicated, is it? If you've got some terrible thing that you need to remove from society, but you can't just ban it, then you tax the hell out of it. And that's what we've got to do.
Yeah. So is this kind of rapidly emerging offset voluntary markets delaying, not doing that any favors, that theme, or is it going to help?
So what I think we're in now is the recognition that our work on climate change isn't really about making money, and it isn't really about physics or chemical problems. Climate change is a social science problem. And that's my way of dodging your question because I don't know the answer. I think that the barrister for the defense of your case would say, if we do anything to take the heat off taxation and regulation of greenhouse gas emissions with net zero and sequestration, then that's very dangerous and was wasting everyone's time. The case for the prosecution would say all actions to raise awareness of climate change and what is in some ways forms of voluntary taxation, which is really what net zero offsets are, help pave the way for mandatory taxation. So I could look at it either way.
Yeah, because it is an interesting one from my perspective. So it is so obvious, like you say, that this needs a proper mechanism around carbon, like a proper market around carbon. And you've got the option of going with tax. You've got an option of better credits and better tradable commodities. And at the moment, the fear of the voluntary market is that there's a lot of people and a lot of projects that aren't doing anything, but people are making money from them. And it's very cynical to think to have a scheme that's meant to be about improvement, about helping, that isn't genuine, and that's the biggest fear I have. Whereas if you didn't have that and you could push straight for tax,
I think that the problem people have is that the carbon markets are a very, very long way away from being one thing. So you and I can start happy offsets tomorrow, and we can be telling people that we're planting trees in Wales, and maybe we are, and maybe we're not, and maybe will pay us, and maybe they won't. That's what I call the Wild West.
Yeah.
There's a very, very large number of shades of grey through to the EU emissions trading system, whereby 1 ton emission rights or negative emissions in the EU ETS is worth €51 cash.
Yeah.
And if you're a company inside the EU ETS and you've got a way of reducing, 1,000 tons,
Yeah.
you'll be able to realize €50,000 of benefit cash. So between the very hard, effective EU ETS, although it took a decade to get work properly,
Yeah.
and, the complete cowboy. This is all called the carbon markets, but they're very, very different things.
Yeah, they are polar opposites, aren't they? Really, that's the thing. So can you find a middle? So I always find that with sustainability, often it is a bit of a middle ground. In a pragmatic way, one extreme you might have the old school kind of capitalist financial models. At the other end, you might have the really idealistic green eco models. Sustainability is potentially something people can get behind because you can find balance via it as kind of a more inclusive approach. So I wonder if carbon is the ultimate sustainability issue in many ways, because it's the ultimate currency for sustainability.
I mean, it's a very peculiar word, sustainability. I actually think it's a code word that we use to describe problems the government can't fix. So, for example, aliens attacked Earth, in flying saucers. We'd sort of scramble the Air Force and
Yeah.
they'd be fighting it out in the skies, right? No one would say that was a sustainability problem, because that's kind of what governments can do. But it's where we look through government like it wasn't even there. And then we say, oh, well, that's sustainability. But I think actually sustainability is it's a word for a geopolitical situation whereby national governments can't really control global corporations and global capital. And so the public sort of comment around it in this sort of ethereal way, and we call it sustainability, but it's basically just public safety failure in government.
Wow, that's a really, I've not heard that. I've not thought of it that way before, because I love the simplicity. I find it a lot more simple than that, the way I look at the definition of it. But I don't know, is that because I'm just thinking, just going back to kind of where you're coming from, your view of this. Do you have an environment, would you think of yourself as an environmental activist?
No, I do think of myself as a public safety officer.
Okay.
I feel, I'm quite frankly, I'd be happy to stand up alongside the Army and the Navy and MI5 and sort of say, I'm here to protect the state and to protect the society. The sort of, if you go back to the concept of the Leviathan, the sort of, we give ourselves up to this great creature called the state, and in exchange, it protects us, right? Well, the state is not protecting us from climate change at the moment. So I see myself as having myself and you and many others, we have an interim role to help the state protect the citizens. That's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what our philosophy is about, how you progress from here, how you improve and how you do better. And that's the same with CDP, right? It's not just about, it's the number 4, that's what we've done. It's about how you build on that and how you do better and how you improve systems and processes, right? That's the whole point of this, not just to say we're here.
Yeah. I mean, there was a quote from James Lovelock I'll never forget. He said, they can't respond to climate change with a radical back to nature campaign. He said it would be like jumping off an ocean liner in the Atlantic. He said to swim the rest of the journey in glorious independence.
Yeah.
He said we are so much a part of the technosphere. So that's I felt I was born in 1964. I've grown up in a world with very large amounts of technology, very large corporations, very large investors deploying that globally at sort of exponential. As I got older, I was talking to a 19-year-old youth activist the other day. He said, my generation understand that change is exponential. The internet.
Yeah.
So in that environment of exponential change, you're absolutely right. We're not really seeking constants here. But I do think we've got laws. You can't murder people. You can't burn down buildings.
Yeah.
In those laws at some point will say you can't emit greenhouse gases
Yeah.
that the biosphere. We just need to get it added into law.
Or common sense. Like, that's the other thing, right? Your parents teach you not to steal. They do their best to teach you, good parents, the right values, etc. A good value is not to waste. A good value is not to pollute. A good value is, improving what's around you. And I'm seeing. I've got fortunately a very young family, a young daughter she's 5, but she's on it. She's naturally on it, and they're building it into her in school as well. The activities and it's this consciousness I don't think was there when I was growing up. More like the ability to ask the question. You covered it at the start with Greta Thunberg and that kind of movement, but it's asking more of people, isn't it? Here is a big thing. Asking you to be better is a simple thing.
Well, I mean, one thing I've studied a lot of activism, although I don't describe myself as activist. I've been a political student for all my life, really. And there is a famous phrase that the best people to break the chains are those who wear them. And that's where youth really come in, because by 2050, I'm going to be pretty old. I'm going to be 86 if I make it. So it's kind of not about me.
No.
If I was going to be, 50 in 2050, well, that's something else. That's really something else. That's like, the second half of my life in some jeopardy. And I mean, we've got to have sort of focus on we've got to take some responsibility here, frankly. That's ultimately what it is. I did a master's in 97, Anita Roddick, her brilliant New Academy of Business, master's in responsibility in business practice.
Saw that, yeah.
But that's really what we've got to do. We've got to take responsibility, and that's what I think the youth are helping us. Uh, Parents are very peculiar about their children, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we just got to extend that principle. We've got the will, we just got to find the way.
Yeah, we've got to find a way to enable them, right? And give them a means in which to do that and express themselves and the ideas, right? Right, and not stifle it. I've been finding this just with our product, right? If I want to evolve Rio to be as good as it can be, I need a much younger view of what this can be. Because my job should be to facilitate. I've got a few ideas, but my job is to facilitate your ideas. I think because that's the future and the way that it should come through. But it's quite tricky that, because traditionally we've gone the other way. You hire more senior, you hire more. We've got to find more balance, haven't we, of youth? I think as well within these within decision-making powers of these kind of organisations as well, which is a hard thing to reconcile. Getting that view into a boardroom.
It's the law, and I'll tell you why it's the law. It's because typically there's an asset owner or a trustee or something, a pension fund or whatever. They've got the money maybe with an asset manager, and that asset is using ESG data sources to help inform their investment decisions. What I mean, I said this to youth activists the other day, and she was fascinated by it. If you worked at, I don't know, IBM or something, and you've just joined IBM, you're maybe age 25, you're in the IBM pension scheme. At the other end of the scale, there's somebody who's 95 years old who's in the IBM pension scheme. Now, the fiduciary who's running that pension scheme has an equal obligation of responsibility to the 95-year-old and the 25-year-old. So they must take time horizons that account for when the 25-year-old is 95. You can't say, I'm not interested in 50 years from now. That is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Trustee, and therefore you need to buy the ESG products and services that will allow you to invest into that time frame.
So what's the future for CDP then in that environment? How does it evolve? How does it stay relevant, I guess?
Well, we've stayed relevant by getting consistently larger every year and helping many, many more companies on their journey. We've stayed relevant by expanding 10 years ago to water and the drivers of deforestation. We're going to stay relevant by, and I mean, I'm going to make that phrase a little bit more positive. I mean, for us, we feel very relevant. It's more like how the rest of the world stays relevant,
Yeah. I guess I meant no offence. I meant in more in the sense that
person I am.
No.
Try to hide it.
I meant I can see the evolution because I know about CDP and then those themes that you talked about, nature-related disclosures and how that's moved, not just a simple carbon figure, but it's evolving more to that level of accountability. But that's I guess I can't not ask you about the alphabet soup before we're going to move on to the personal bit.
Please do. I love the alphabet soup. I mean, what's very, very helpful for people to understand is that there are two places corporations report. Either in their annual report, possibly also their sustainability report to their regulator.
Yeah.
And through CDP.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of the alphabet soup, as it's called, and here we're referring to the GRI, SASB, IIRC, and the TCFD, they are all giving guidance for how you report in an annual report. But I just want to remind everyone listening that there's only two reporting platforms, the annual report and CDP.
Yeah.
So it's not as complicated as it looks.
No, that cut right through a lot of the noise for me. That's great. so I'm just conscious we've talked. It's been great kind of talking. We'll come back to some of these themes because I think some of this is going to come out in some of your music choices as well. But if we can talk a bit about that, I say it's an absolutely beautiful playlist to listen to before we talk. So what I'd like to do is kind of drill into the why you might have chosen these songs as well, and see if there's any kind of relevance to CDP or your view in kind of in sustainability, etc. So the first song you chose was "Surfs Up" by the Beach Boys. So why did you choose that one?
Well, I mean, just the process I went through is I've been compiling a sort of Spotify playlist since I got Spotify about 3 years ago. And I just went through it and I chose the 7 tracks that I thought would work here. And it was extremely difficult, but they were the tracks that sort of kind of mean the most to me. And there's a little story behind each one. And the story behind Surfs Up is it's not such a it's not a record I've known for a very long time. I've only known it for about 3 years. It is an extremely strange and complex piece of music. And I think people think of the Beach Boys and these sort of silly songs from, let's go surfing now, everybody. This is not that. This is very much, it's in a kind of orchestral style. It's a very complex piece of music. But the little story behind it is that I was with my brother and sister in my brother's shed, and I'm very fond of my brother and sister, but we were having a very, very moving conversation, and it was very moving. And it was only afterwards I realized a month or two later that it was because we had been listening to Surfs Up that made the conversation moving.
Wow.
So what I would say, and that's a little bit of a theme that will come out, is that music and memory probably are connected, that music connects to the file headings of our memories. And there's a bit of Bach later, but Bach through generations because you could be born in 2005 and listen to a piece of Bach, and your memories from 2010 and 2015 will be brought to the surface. So that to me is what this piece of music does. It's a genius at the peak of their powers doing something very weird, and it rips your heart open.
It does, absolutely, because it's like you said, everyone associates it with "Let's go surfing now" and good vibrations, and it's
the lyrics of this song are completely bonkers.
Yeah, it is. A lot of their songs are like that, aren't they? They when you get into the albums as well, there's some beautifully bizarre pieces of music, and yeah, that does have like a lot in common with the great composers and just the constructs of it as well. It's some incredible stuff, and that's on to the next one actually, the Prelude number 2, the Gershwin. Now, is this 3 Preludes number 2 in E flat minor? Do you know the specifics of it? Because I was trying to look for it on. It's a beautiful piece of. It's a great piece of music, whichever way around. So, but where does that one come from? Do you play pianist as well?
Sorry, no. Unfortunately, it's kind of interesting. My parents sort of compelled my elder brother and sister to play,
Yeah.
and they didn't like it, and it put 2 of them off classical music.
Oh no.
So by the time they got to me, they thought we're just going to let this one go. That allowed me to not develop any musical skills at all, so I cannot play at all. But it meant that I do feel a very, very deep affiliation. And there are 3 phases in my musical consumption. Actually, there was pop music when I was younger, and then classical music when I was in my sort of 20s and 30s. And then I'm indebted to Resonance FM for bringing me to the 3rd genre, which is unpopular contemporary music. Which is, of course, absolutely enormous. The thing about the Gershwin and the actual one, I'm just going to give you the first few bars of it now, so you know which one we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the one.
The point I would make about this is it's a piece of classical music. Gershwin is a classical music composer, but he's clearly being very influenced by jazz here, and what you would basically called Black American music or Black music for the United States. And I think there's something so powerful about the combination of the classical form, um, which is, thought to be closed and formal, with essentially the voice of, I mean, in simple terms, aspect of the blues, and you combine the two of those, and I find myself sort of kind of just, crying in a very happy way. A lot of my music's very sad, by the way. I think I'm a
Yeah,
happy person, and a lot of this music is very sad. And I think it's not unusual for very happy people or people who
yeah.
present quite happy to be touched by sad music.
It's emotive, definitely. Yeah, there's that. There's a yeah. I know what you mean. It was. I was listening to it. I don't know if it didn't make me sad. It just made me think
Oh
quite
no, I mean,
deeply. You know.
it's
So
very, very beautiful.
yeah,
You find yourself reflecting. But I think that what I really liked about it was the juxtaposition of the formality of a classical music with essentially jazz and blues, and Gershwin, no small talent,
yeah.
uh, puts those two together. And I mean, just apropos of nothing, there is an amazing combination of "Sweet Home Alabama" with Kelly's Country Grammar. You can find it on YouTube, and it's called "Sweet Home Country Grammar." And again, it's a of redneck guitars with hip hop. Those
Yeah,
combinations I find very attractive.
yeah. Bootlegging. It's becoming very fashionable again, isn't it? That kind of concept of pasting random genres together. And there's also the ones with the sea shanties that have got
Yeah.
really quite popular. And I was listening. I was listening to something about the specials the other night on Six Music and how they kind of that composition came around and some of the experiments they did, different music styles and clashes and dub and it's just fascinating. I love that, like that mess. It should be a mess, but it's something kind of
Well, it
like
creates a
incredible
thrill.
come out of it.
I remember when I first kind of encountered, sweet and sour,
Yeah.
Chinese food. You're like, this is no one's ever done that before.
Yeah. Oh, you've done to me. Um, I was just thinking of there was a Peter Kay, like when he had this joke about cheesecake, and he's like, "What cheesecake with cheese? Cheesecake? Are you mad?" That's what he said. But anyway, maybe you have to come from Bolton to understand that one. The third one is into Bach territory now, so a Bach piece. Now, yeah. So is this again? Like, how did you get into this piece in
Well,
Bach as
there's a
well?
little story behind this one, which is that Bach is great, and of course, I wanted to have my favorite Mozart and my favorite Beethoven and my favorite Wagner and whatever and Schubert and all these, But the thing about this particular piece is, I had two lovely parents, a very kind of fun and thoughtful, big-hearted mother, and then sort of super serious scientist father who also was a sweetie pie in his own way. And he loved the organ, and used to play the organ. And I don't know if he ever really played this piece, but somehow a lot of experience of him playing the organ and his character, actually, um, I found in this piece. So it's really this piece is really just a sense of how my father felt, and it's more sort of aloof and than he was, but the best of it is the best of him.
Yeah, that's lovely. And then into Brian Eno, Final Sunset. That's a great tune, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I wanted to, I'm imagining myself on a desert island. I've only got this
Yeah,
woods. One of the largest genres of music I would say I enjoy is ambient, and of course, Brian Eno is really at the heart of that. Although there's so much wonderful ambient music, I do think Brian Eno is really one of my favorite composers. Although he denies he's a composer, he says he's a producer, and he's quite self-effacing about his talent. But I think it's absolutely enormous when you think of the bands that he's influenced and been at
yeah,
of.
amazing.
And I was looking, I mean, I've got 100 Brian Eno tracks, but I think Final Sunset he was the best example of where you can just get taken, and it's somewhere else, it's out of life. And it reminds me actually of one CDP story, which was I'd gone to Abu Dhabi. I'd been put up in a 5-star hotel that leans at 17 degrees. One of the only guests, kind of peculiar. And gone off to a conference. We'd won the Zayed Future Energy Prize. We'd been given $1.5 million cash, not cash, but you know what I mean.
Big briefcase.
And a big gold coin that actually was worth £9,000 in its own right. And I went back to my hotel and with the views out over Abu Dhabi at 17 degrees on the 30th floor, and I ran a bath and just listened to actually Brian Eno and Harold Budd to try and sort of live with the glorious strangeness of life.
Yeah, that was lovely. Very surreal as well.
Very
With $1.5 million in the suitcase next to you in a bag in a really tall hotel in Abu Dhabi. Brilliant. Now the next one, I think this was my favourite one on the playlist. The Garden is Becoming a Road Room by Michael Nyman and Michael Nyman Band. I love this song, and I don't think I'd heard it before, but it's a lovely song, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fascinated that you think that's the one. That's
I loved it.
I thought might connect least with people who might be listening. But look, alongside ambient music, it has a kind of sister called minimalism, and that actually trace that back to Moondog. Not a lot of people know that crazy blind guy Moondog, who did some fantastically interesting music, heavily influenced, people like Philip Glass and others. But there's this whole world of the minimal this sort of repetitive style, and actually I think that Michael Nyman's done some great soundtracks, but this particular track I just noticed went much deeper with me, and it became a sort of theme of a year or two of my life. I played it to a friend, and it's completely overblown, dramatic, which of course it is. But I mean, sometimes in our inner life, we feel we're in maybe an overblown and dramatic state. And then I think we like to hear music that kind of can reflect that back to ourselves.
Yeah, I think that minimal, that's really interesting. I love minimalism, but I love electronic music as well. And I love the minimalist side of electronic music. So, maybe that explains why I like that one so much. And I just really enjoyed that, listening to that. And the next one, I love Annie Lennox, but this has got a story behind this song.
Oh, there's definitely a story behind this.
Yeah, don't let it bring you down. So
I mean,
the 90s.
Well, I mean, I had the great privilege to work at some distance, but with Christiana Figueres towards the Paris Agreement, but very much with Tom Karnak, who was her head of strategy, who she works with still, and we do a podcast together actually called Outrage and Optimism. I'd been in Paris, kind of having really nothing to do with Christiana and Tom, who were very busy doing the Paris Agreement. But I'd been bouncing around, and I was doing my CDP work, and it was great. I didn't really know what was going to happen. We'd heard a bit the day before that maybe there was going to be a good outcome. And I went to a party that evening in Paris at my friend Jane Abikshire's house, and there were some lovely people there, and it was a really nice atmosphere. And I heard this song, and it sort of went, under my radar a little bit. But when I woke up the next morning, and this was the day of the Paris Agreement, I got a notification through that I was going to get a chance to be there in the front row. It was really very moving for me. And I started listening to this song again. I listened to many other versions of it. I listened to the original Neil Young version. I listened to all the greatest songs 100 people have done in different ways. And for me, it will always express the secret magic of the Paris Agreement, this song.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that answer. That's brilliant, isn't it? Wow.
I remember I pursued Jane actually and said, that amazing song, and she didn't quite know what I was going on about. And actually, I discovered my friend Dylan Tanner from Influence Map. It was his iPod that was on her sound system. It was really Dylan that introduced me to this, but it is a very beautiful song. The song can't move you like this. I mean, it connects to my big story, but it's obviously got, it's got a landing strip that such a story
Yeah.
can land on.
Excellent. Oh, yeah, fantastic. And then last but not least, into some hip hop, reminding me of Seth by Common. So where's that? Yeah, like what's the love of hip hop all about then?
Well,
Dancing.
You get older and it becomes less common to go to out dancing. Although I live in Brighton, and a lot of people of all ages dance on the seafront in Brighton. You'll often be on a dance floor, as it were, or a dance surface with 70-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and it's very normal to all be dancing together, which is kind of, I like that actually.
Awesome. Yeah.
But there is no doubt in my mind that there is the most spectacularly brilliant music that comes out of the I guess it's in a lot of the lyrics, economic folk. I mean, there's much more to it than there's a social mission, but I think that the sort of passion and the sense of struggle and also joy that I experienced through a lot of music from essentially Black people in the United States since about 1900 is just extraordinary. And but of course, hip hop belongs to white people like Eminem. No group owns a genre.
No.
I think some of the most powerfully emotive music I've ever listened to comes from the hip hop genre, and this is just a prime example of a beautiful rap song, somebody referring, being reflective about their life, their experiences, and then the combination of that with a female vocal that is unbelievably positive and uplifting together. I find that, and just a stunning beat. The whole thing together. If your feet are not moving when you're listening to this, your heart has probably stopped.
Oh, excellent. Well, they've got to listen to that now, haven't they? Like that's selling it. So if you want to listen to Paul's playlist, it's on Spotify and Apple Music, and you should definitely do that. So the last couple of things. So you get to take to this desertified island we now live on. You get to take a gadget. So what is it that you're gonna take with you?
It's all about the rules, isn't it? I mean, I'm going primarily for a satellite phone, and I just like to tell them where I am, because I don't think, I might wait a day or two. I don't waste the battery. But fundamentally, I think the idea is to escape. I'm fond of my friends, my work, this world, and I don't think I'd do very well on a desert island.
Well, but what if the world is a desertified island? How do you handle that?
Well, you make do with what you got.
Yeah.
Actually, I have lived alone for most of my life, and I'm kind of fine with that. But you can sometimes feel lonely, but music stops feeling lonely. So maybe it's my music player, maybe it's a satellite Spotify account. That's probably what I'm really after.
That's the beauty of an iPhone, isn't it? Just take your iPhone, you've got everything you'd ever need. So
no, I mean, when I was sort of 20, there were about 40 devices that are all contained in this one device.
well, that was the best sales pitch of all time, was when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone. You watch that presentation.
I watched it actually at Christmas. I watched it at Christmas, and I thought what was funny for me was he thought he was bigging it up, but he probably had no idea it would be by far the most successful product in the history of the world.
No, absolutely. Yeah, mind blown, isn't it? Because I'm on the 12th edition now. I think I found my number one the other day, which was quite cool to look at the difference.
Well, I mean, like all great products, it's not really a product; it's a channel through which infinity things can pass.
That was the cleverness of the idea, wasn't it? The hardware and software used to be exclusive of each other, but he found iTunes a genius. And this is the thing. I've probably said this loads of times on this podcast, and maybe I won't be able to do it in the future. But I remember if you told 14-year-old Dan that he could have all the music in the world for £10 a month. He'd have thought you were insane. He
Yeah.
would have bitten your hand off, don't get me wrong, but he would have thought you were insane because he was spending, 40, 50 quid of his hard-earned cash on CDs and vinyl. So it's just incredible what this has enabled. It's so positive.
I would just go beyond that to say that if you told the 14-year-old Paul that I would have access to all human knowledge within 10 seconds from a device in my pocket, and I would also be able to directly communicate by letter or by voice or by video with 2 billion people. Again, I wouldn't believe you.
Did you? I always thought this would be like an interesting idea for a film or something. If your 14-year-old self woke up one morning and had an iPhone that was linked to 2020, and how you would use that information in the world. Well, for me, that would have been in like the mid 1990s. So, what could I have done? What could I have done with that knowledge to push sustainability or change?
Well, I mean, you would be a god, so don't
You would, wouldn't you?
talk about. But I mean, I can remember in 1994, for example, I would, get my post in the morning, open it up, maybe photocopy a letter or two if it was relevant to the colleagues. Then I would, have my meetings. I might send a motorbike to get an annual report from a company, which and then I would work on my letters in the afternoon to get them in the post by 5 p.m. Well, that just sounds insane to anybody born after 1995. But it was, and I think that the point I would really make is that the combination of email, a browser, and cheap phones, and all the rest of it, is so big. We've really got no way of grasping it. It's like technology is like the water, and we're like the fish. We kind of know it. We're just
absolutely. Yeah, I hadn't thought, isn't it? And finally, so you get to choose a box set as well. And I've not seen this, so it'd be good to get a bit of an explanation on it. A very British coup. So is this from the 1980s or 90s or?
It was. I think it came out in the late 80s. Actually, I remember I watched it at the time. I just did a little bit of a flick on YouTube, and probably there's quite a lot of it there if you're looking for it. And it was done. It was written by a politician, and actually, I was listening to Alistair Campbell on Private Passions with Michael Bartley on Radio 3 on Sunday, but he commented that he worked on it also. It is the story of how a quite left-wing Labour Prime Minister is unseated by the British establishment in a coup, and it describes how that would happen. And it's really a warning, actually, that our democracy is always on thin ice, and the price of true democracy is eternal vigilance. And by the way, for the musicians out there, for the musos, it has the great mass by Mozart in there as just this incredible soundtrack accompanying a really well produced piece of film. So do watch it. It's also a book, thoroughly recommended, a warning about the fragility of democracy.
Awesome. Definitely check that out. So Paul, before we have to round up, it's been amazing talking to you.
Lovely talking to you.
What can you give like easy tips now for businesses looking to kind of do better about the way they disclose or the way they look at sustainability reporting?
Well, I mean, a business of any size can work out that your scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are the fossil fuels you purchase, scope 1, and the electricity you purchase, scope 2, they are the simplest thing in the world to identify and report, or at least just, if you're too small to report them to anyone, you're going to report them to CDP, you probably have to pay us a bit, or you just, report them on your website, put them in your accounts, whatever you want to do. But they're already in your audited accounts. You've already got invoices for those. So just pull out your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, write them down, look at them, establish the trends. You can look back over a couple of years, and then think about how you can reduce them. And then, of course, your scope 3 emissions, which is your supply chain, you can actually work with CDP to get data from your suppliers, so contact us. And your product use and disposal, what products are you making? And I mean, for a company like Honest Burger, I would say that Honest Burger have cut their emissions by probably 20% in their scope 3 because they sell the amazing Beyond Meat burger. Their plant burger. It's the most expensive burger they sell. But I go from Honest Burger to Honest Burger to Honest Burger, asking the managers what percentage of their burgers are plant burgers. Now, it's gone up from 10% to 15% to 20% to 25% to 30%. This product is better than, it tastes better, you enjoy it more. And of course, that is really the best way to cut emissions, is to sell your customers a low carbon alternative. And the lesson from is you can make more money out of it. You can charge more for it, because there's a definition of marketing, that the root definition of marketing is giving people what they want. Nobody wants dangerous climate change. So use your business, use new products and services, use technology, sell the solutions, and you'll make a lot of money and save the world.
So is that greenium, a green premium?
I love that. I've never heard that word before, greenium. Absolutely. I mean, there are two bags here. In one hand, I have a Sainsbury's plastic bag, cost me 5p. In the other hand, I have a Gucci bag that cost me €500. They both carry my shoes equally well on a Saturday night, but one costs 10,000 times more than the other.
Yeah.
So value is perception.
Yeah.
And perception is reality. So, market this, sell it, make money out of it, build a business out of it. And, the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, became the richest person in the world by starting an electric car company. The climate billionaires are just beginning to be minted. Could be you.
Could be. And that's great advice for people aspiring to get careers in this field as well, isn't it? It's the new model. So, Paul, once again, thanks so much for your time. It's been incredible. This has been like a deluxe session today. It's been great. It's been nearly an hour. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm sure everyone will, enjoy hearing it. And thank you for CDP.
My pleasure. We sort of dig up the tools, but it's you that finish the job. So thank you for your inspiring work, adding insight to these data, and really enjoyed being with you today. Great to be with a fellow music lover, and a delightful conversation. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Paul. So everybody, as we said, you can watch this on YouTube. You can get Paul's music on Spotify and Apple Music. And you can listen to us on a podcast on Apple as well, on iTunes. So enjoy. And once again, thanks very much, Paul. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.